Welcome to Detailed, an original podcast by RCAT. This is the show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My guests today are Jill Traylor, Principal/Director of Interior Design, and Tyler Guidroz, Associate/Architect at EskewDumezRipple, or EDR, with offices in New Orleans, Louisiana and Washington D.C. As Director of Interior Design, Jill brings over 20 years of national expertise in the design of commercial interiors, having practiced in Manhattan, Dallas, and New Orleans. She brings experience in a wide range of project types with a focus on workplace, hospitality, and mixed-use projects. An integral leader in countless project success stories, most notably Maya in Salt Lake City, Utah, The Shop at the CAC, Palmisano Corporate Headquarters, and Tsunami New Orleans, Jill brings a holistic approach to the integration of interiors in EDR's projects that is warm, welcoming, and ultimately exceptionally thoughtful. In recognizing the complexity of the spaces that we create, Jill's role as Director of Interior Design cements not only the long-term growth of the firm and its work, but an investment in the team and the continued success of the Interiors division. Tyler moved from Lafayette, Louisiana to pursue architecture at Tulane University. Studying and working during the rebuilding of New Orleans enhanced his understanding of progress and growth, now refined through the lenses of place, culture, history, and context. After serving as project architect for the Center of Developing Entrepreneurs, or CODE, a unique 215,000 square foot multi-use space of collaboration, co-working, and corporate offices, Tyler's recent studio work is focused on feasibility studies for a range of higher education institutions, including at Tulane, LSU, and for Tulane's School of Medicine and their migration to the former charity hospital. Tyler believes that designing is an act of giving, both to the public and to the client. Highly collaborative inside the studio and with EDR clients, he enjoys sharing his knowledge through tutorials and through teaching. He strives to push forward the use of advanced software to create architecture that is a register of our time and a reference to our place. The project we are going to chat about today is the Center of Developing Entrepreneurs, or CODE, in Charlottesville, Virginia. CODE is a new mixed-use project in downtown Charlottesville comprised of a new public plaza for the historic pedestrian mall and 215,000 square feet of multi-use space, including a strategic combination of co-working, office space, shared amenities, and retail. Now, let's get into the details. Jill and Tyler, welcome to Detailed. How are you today?
Doing well.
Doing well?
Hey.
Ready to talk about this project?
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being here. It's Friday for all of us. And so I notice everybody's got a smile on their face. I'm pretty sure that has something to do with it. I like to start off each episode with some icebreaker question. And I just kind of make it up as I go along, and it's different every time. And I just started teaching my CDT class last night, and so this is something that popped into my head because it's a pet peeve for me. So I thought I'd ask you for our icebreaker, what excuse do you hear in professional settings that drives you bonkers? And I'll give you an example. 2 that drive me nuts. I don't have time, because we all know you don't have all the time it's going to take later to fix what's going to take a lot less time now. Or we have always done it this way. drives me insane. Literally drives me insane. So for each of you, what's one of the ones you hear that you wish you never heard in the industry?
I guess for me, sometimes I can't figure it out, or it doesn't work. Can't do that. It doesn't work. Because I feel like there's always a way to make something work if you get creative about it. And so I think that I feel like when people stop too early in their process and give up too easily, that kind of frustrates me.
I could see that. How about you, Tyler?
So I'll make a note not to say that next time we're working together, Jill. So for me, I think, and it literally just happened to me this morning, um, I hate being told that I'm overthinking it.
Oh,
Because like almost every time somebody said that, turns out months later, days later, months later, turns out I was thinking about it the exact right amount that we needed to think about it then, and now it's a problem. And like, it's just, man, it's belittling, right? And it's just like, let me follow what this train of thought is taking me down, because it's important.
so we're kindred spirits because I am an overthinker, but I don't see that as a bad thing.
Yeah, I think this is a good.
Oftentimes, go ahead.
I think this is a good profession for overthinkers. Because we have to. It's like everything is happening all at once, coming together. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. And so, and I don't like it when people say that to me either, because it almost always, I could probably do a little less of it in my personal life. But at work, it almost always comes out in the positive that
Yeah.
I was like, wait, I'm not ready to take my teeth out of this yet. What about this? What about that? And that typically pays off in the work environment, or at least in our work environment. I love those answers. I'm going to write those down for my class. I throw them out there to my class for 12 weeks. Different. Don't say this in my class. We already read your official bio in our intro. So briefly, tell me one interesting thing about you as a human being outside of architecture. We're also workaholics in this industry. And people tend to forget that we're also human beings with interests and hobbies and passions outside of the actual work we do, even if there's not a ton of them. So give me one for each of you. Jill, you want to go first?
Oh, I was going to let Tyler go first.
Okay, Tyler, you get to go first because she's the boss.
Okay. Yeah, sure thing. So this one was kind of tough for me. But when I think about it, one of the things that's been rewarding recently has been working with a community organization that I'm getting involved with. It's called Together New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an organization of organizations. It's largely faith-based, and it's interfaith. So it's churches, synagogues, and mosques coming together to solve common problems. And it's been a really rewarding thing to get involved in, because you get to meet people that you never really would cross paths with otherwise, and we're working together on things that we have more in common than we have apart. We had a really bad hurricane about 2 years ago, and the city lost power for about 9 days, a week, 9 days. And one of the big initiatives for Together New Orleans is saying, hey, we have our congregations are ready to get back and ready to help out after the storm, but they weren't able to because there was no power. So what if our congregations, our churches, synagogues, mosques had solar panels with battery backup set up and ready to go? So after a storm hit, we would be able to hit the ground running, provide cooling centers and places to gather, charge your phone, get some AC, refrigerate some food, and start the relief efforts there. It's kind of meeting people where they are, and that's like it's been a really rewarding thing to get involved in and roll up sleeves. I think that's the most interesting thing I've got going on these days outside of the office.
Well, I think that's pretty interesting because I think that when we have activities outside of our work that actually help people as well,
Yeah.
that means something, and so I get that, it doesn't always have to be, I like to bungee jump on Saturdays, not that there's anything wrong with that either, but how about you, Jill?
So mine is completely different
That's
from
totally
Tyler, but I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur and crafter. And a few years back, after I moved back to New Orleans, um, I got right back into the spirit here, and a friend and I started making hair flare, which is, feathers and jewels and all these things. And you'd be surprised how many events around town that you need a little hair flare. So she and I started selling it on the side of the street at the Mardi Gras parades, and did quite well. And so then we started making them for Christmas, Easter, any event or holiday you can think of where you want to put on something special. We started doing that. So it's been pretty fun, and it's a great creative outlet. I don't do it for the money. I purely do it for the creative outlet part. So
Remind me after we're done with this recording to send you a picture of my feathered pink flamingo outfit.
Oh, that's
I may need pictures of the hair flare. Let's put it that way. You might be telling the right girl about this little side gig of yours.
A new
it
customer.
Sounds like a blast, though. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I can promise you have a new customer.
Awesome.
So don't let me forget to get that information from you. So, serial entrepreneur. That's funny, considering the building we're talking about. So let's start talking about this building. I found this to be a really, really intriguing project. When I read about it, I was like, oh, I definitely want to have them on and talk about this building. But before we get into specific project details, how about you tell me the story? I mean, why did they decide they needed this building? How did it come to be, or the motivation behind it?
So this project started, there was it's in Charlottesville, Virginia, and there was a local businessman that had been very successful in his career and wanted to, he was at the point where he wanted to bring something back and give back to the city of Charlottesville in a way and sort of focus his efforts in his city that he loved. The problem that he was looking to solve was he saw a similar thing that you see in college towns all over, is that brain drain after this super talented group of kids graduates, and then they leave and they go all over the place. And so he was envisioning a place where people could come together and grow their careers and stay in Charlottesville and build up their professional life outside of school and keep them in the city. And he was smart, I think, to think that it needed to be a place that drew on why Charlottesville itself was unique and special. Why are they not going to New York City? Why are they not going to Boston, Philadelphia, D.C.? And for him, it was nature. It was the connection to nature. He grew up on a farm. One of the initial prompts was he wanted to walk out of, and he was going to work in this building. So one of his initial prompts was he wanted to be able to walk out of his door of his office and feel like he was in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is just, I mean, the nature out there is incredible. And so that was just like an amazing prompt, along with the call to create a place where young professionals could grow up and grow their business ideas, grow their professional lives up in a building. So those were like the initial prompts that we were given.
Okay, so I read somewhere that this building is an architectural response to an Irregularly shaped, complexly sloping site. Say that 3 times fast. In a historic district. Let's start there in talking about the building. How did this site configuration, because it's an interesting shaped building, how did this site configuration influence the design of the building?
So, first of all, there's 18 feet of elevation change on the site, and the site is a triangle. So we're based in New Orleans, and we don't have a ton of that vernacular here. I don't think there's 18 feet of elevation change in the whole city here. So
If anything, it's in the reverse, right, Tyler? We're in a ball.
Right. So but luckily, we had a great partner architect that we want to make sure we mention here. We worked with Wolf Ackerman on this job, whose office is just down the street, and they're a super talented group of guys, and it was just like such a rewarding process to work with them. They really brought their rigor to this project, and it was great to design with them. We designed this building before COVID and before lockdown, but we were already doing tons of Zoom calls and collaborative design with them over the internet. And then once we got into construction, they had a ton of craft and care about getting these details to actually work out, that it was great to work with them and slog through all these things. But it was, the elevation change was a big deal. And then the triangular site, we ended up with sort of 2 bars of the building that are exactly 38.5 degrees apart. I don't think I'm ever going to forget that angle. But we wanted to maximize the goals that we had set out, which off of the bat, we looked at the site, and immediately one of the big moves that we made was actually making the floor plate narrower than what the site could have borne. We made these 2 bars skinnier so that it would free up, and we kept things at the property line so that it would free up open space in the middle. This project is on the historic pedestrian mall. It used to be their main street, and Charlottesville had the foresight to turn that into a pedestrian mall, which is a great outdoor experience. And this project bookends that pedestrian mall that has a lot of spillover plazas connected to it with really gracious tree canopies. So immediately, one of the things that we set up as a priority was to take a slight hit to leasable square footage with these narrower floor plates and free up space in the middle to create another one of these plazas for the city. And then work with the intrinsic benefits of all of that activity to make more valuable real estate that we did create inside the building. The narrower floor plates also create a better condition for daylight and views. There's more daylight that gets into the floor plate, and then there's also a chance for cross ventilation with the operable windows that we got into the project, and that's definitely something I want to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, I was just one of the first things that really stood out for me, and why I added that question is, wow, that's an interesting shape. And I mean, I think it's really unique and it kind of stands out, but I thought there has to be a reason for that, I just had to know, was there a reason for it, or did somebody just decide, I want an arrow-shaped building or a triangular-shaped building, but I love it. So, okay, good. Well, now I know. Can you tell me about one particular or notable design challenge that you faced outside of the slope of the site that you faced on this project and how you solved it?
So I have something for this too. I could do that. So the going back to the initial prompt, um, we and it was early on, also in the planning. We have these two bars, and what we wanted to do was we wanted to think about how could we foster this cross pollination that that was a priority for the owner. And the program of the building is that the first two floors are more of a co-working, sort of like a WeWork model. There's also some public space that's open to everybody in the ground floor, and there's some amenity space that's open to everybody in the building. And then the upper floors, the third floor begins having small leasable suites for more manageable for smaller businesses. And then as you go up in the building, the footprints get bigger for as these companies grow. So you end up having a stratus of all of the different kinds of levels of business. And the question was, how do we foster that collision and that cross pollination? And so what we actually did was separate the elevator cores. There's an elevator core that comes up from the parking garage, and then it leaves you in the lobby. And then that lobby has people coming in from the outside using the space as sort of a coffee shop. It has people going to the starting the first day of their new business in their WeWork, sort of co-working sort of space. And then it has people going up to their penthouse suite, and everything in between. And so by making everyone get off at the lobby and cross across, and then get up to their second elevator tower that takes them wherever else they're going, there's a sort of inherent forced collision and activity in this central space. That was a big thing. And it also was, I remember, I think that was somebody in our office who wasn't working on the projects all the time, but we do like these collaborative pinups that people can join in, and we can show progress, and then get feedback and sketch together. And I think it was somebody outside of the strict design team who was like, hey, have you thought about if you do this, and then you can have this corridor under the plaza, and then it'll work out, and then everyone has to mix. It was really rewarding that kind of came about that way.
Yeah, I would say
I love.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was
No,
just
go
going to
ahead, Jill.
say, yeah, the circulation, although intentional, was very confusing to wrap our heads around, because it's like on one side of the building, you're on one floor, but on the other side of the building, you could be on a different floor, even though it's all connected. It was a little bit of some gymnastics. And then, we had an exit stair that came down the exterior side of the building with glass on it, and getting people to figuring out how to get the people to that and out the building was a big challenge. And I would say the back to kind of the idea of the slope, I mean, we're carved into the earth there, right? So some of the spaces had no windows, no access to daylight. And so we had to get really creative in that co-working space on the first floor to make sure that everybody got a glimpse of the outdoors somehow, or some sort of access to daylight. But it kind of worked out a little bit in the favor of that challenge, because the owner, the developer, is a computer code writer of sorts, and so a lot of those folks like to be in the dark, and they don't like to, they don't even, there was a question like, do we even need light fixtures in some of these rooms, because they're just going to keep them off anyway, and they don't need windows because they want to be in a cave. And we're like, well, all right, we got caves here, so it worked to the advantage in some spots.
I love that. We want to be in a cave. How often do you get to design a cave? But I did love that I spotted that the first time I read the description for this project, that you call it a collision. I think that we often, in our ever-changing world and all the technology that does so many things for us now, that we are more connected but more separate than ever. It's that face-to-face physical interaction is limited a lot more by the technology that we all use. And so designing that collision, that forcing people to be in the same space, at least even if it's just for a transitory part of their day, I think is important, that we remember, what the actual dynamic of human face-to-face is and is supposed to be. But the word collision, I was just like, that's genius. I love that. That's just a genius thing to call it. Let's get a little more technical about this building. And I'm going to swap my questions here a little bit. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order. Let's start with the interior and work our way to the exterior. Obviously, I'm a spec writer. This is a podcast about architecture, but I am always really interested in the materials that you used, why you used them, if you used an average material uniquely, or if you used a unique material to make something happen. So I'm guessing Jill is answering this question.
I can take this one.
Yeah. Paint a picture for me of the interior and some of the spaces in this building and some of the things you did with that.
Sure. So, as I mentioned before, this idea that, we're carved into the earth, we played a lot on this idea of cut and contrast and reveal. And so, using in the lobby space in particular, where we carved into the core, we would reveal a slightly different material or a different application of that material from the outside of that core box. So like there's this little jewel box of a coffee shop that's nestled in that big core, and the materials change within that. And I thought that was really interesting. But also the when you talk about the collision, like how do you create a space that people actually want to hang out in? And one of the things that was a focus for us was making this feel a little bit more like a hospitality, like a hotel's lobby versus just an office lobby. So bringing in lots of warm materials, a little bit, things that might seem a little more higher end, a little more tactile, making sure even down to the furniture, that it felt a little bit more like what you might find in a hotel, to encourage people to linger a little bit and to have their meetings in that space. So it becomes more than just that transient space, but it becomes something that you want to sit and work for an hour or two in. When you get into the co-working space in particular, with the owner, we had the opportunity to take some of his analog or his digital, there were digital artwork images that came from his coding. We took them and put them across the backs of the phone booths that we designed, and kind of cut the artwork into little slices of that, into those phone booths. And so it was really, it was unique and to this building because, that's nowhere else. And we took other opportunities to do some unique wall coverings that were directly related to Charlottesville and the area, like huge topographical maps and things like that. Trying to think. Oh, one other place we did have something that we actually called the cave, and it was this little tiny place underneath our treehouse, which I'll talk about that in a second. But in the cave, we used mirrors on the ceiling, put them at certain angles, and that way it kind of felt like you had transported into a totally different universe of sorts, but also helped make the room feel a little bit bigger, or that it was expansive above you, even though the ceilings were probably 7.5 feet tall or something like that. But above that, we had this tree house, which was a little place it was in the co-working space in particular, and you could go up there and there was some lounge seating and there were some desks. But you could have a bird's eye view of the rest of the co-working space, which was really fun and unique.
When I look away, it's not because I'm reading emails or anything like that. I have all of your pictures open to my left, And so I'm like scrolling back and forth through these things as you're describing them to actually get a visual, and just there's things popping out to me. So I'm not sure what space I'm in here. I thought it was going to be the coffee shop, but it's not. But you have this, what is the word? I'm almost like mesh looking like ceiling.
Arctura.
It's a felt ceiling from Arctura. And
Oh, wow.
that was a fun challenge because we had to make it accessible so you could get to the HVAC system above it. But then also, and that's not how the system was necessarily designed. And so we had to work with that manufacturer's technical team to figure out how could we make this work for the space. But it's supposed to provide acoustics as well as giving that visual interest that you see.
Well, obviously it popped out to me. I and at least from the picture, I did not instinctively know that was felt. Now, as I look closer and you describe it, I can see that I actually thought it was metal when I first looked at it. But what a great way to handle multiple things at once and still have something that looks really cool, because that's one thing that popped out. Another thing that popped out for me, and again, I don't know where we are in the building, but you have some stairs going up with a very interesting infill, metal infill panels, or I don't know if you call them panels because they're open, but metal infill up these stairs.
Is it the one with the like metal sticks of sorts?
Yes. Yes, very good way to describe it. I'm like, how do I describe this? Because I don't recall seeing anything like this.
We had a local metal fabricator do those. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, but I think that's where they landed on that. And, the inspiration was just kind of the chaos of what might be in your mind when you're working out a problem. I think that's where that came from, but it did turn out quite nice.
No, it's beautiful. Yeah. Everything, and you definitely have achieved the feel of it being more of a hospitality type of like a hotel lobby kind of feel, as opposed to, or even, like community space in a library or something like that, rather than feeling like your typical office building. There's another space here I have to ask about. So this appears to be some kind of lecture room. It's got seats that are folded up in slots in the floor. Meeting space or lecture room or something like. Tell me about that space, because that looks really cool. And the way those seats are like, just kind of folded up and stacked in there.
Yeah, those are jump seats, and very cool because they don't take up a lot of space when they're not engaged, and they have a very nice detailing to them. But that was one of the spaces. What I was talking about is when you're on the first floor and you get to one side of the building, you're in the auditorium, but you can also get to the auditorium from the second floor as well. So it's like you could actually pass through there to get from one space to the next. But the vision for that was that they could have multiple types of functions in there. So it could be anything from, a musical performance of sorts to a movie screening to a lecture series. Just, what ways can they program that to really involve the community, engage the community, and make the space more accessible to everyone. So, yeah, that was we rolled out the red carpet in there for sure. That's the only place in the project that we use that really intense red color, and that was actually the client's suggestion. So, and I think she did. It was the right call for that room.
Do the this is, and I don't know, maybe I've just not been working in. It hasn't been that long. It's only been 4 years that I haven't been actually working in a full-blown architecture firm, but. I have also not ever seen anything like this before. Do those seats come out? Can you actually pull them out if you wanted to?
You could. The way that they're installed is there's like a metal plate that attaches to the floor that has a metal fin of sorts that chair actually slides onto that fin, if that makes any sense.
Okay, yeah. No, that makes total sense. It's just a really, really unique space. And you're not joking about rolling out the red carpet because that carpet is red. Just looking at a few things that really popped out for me as I'm just glancing through the pictures. What's your favorite part of this building as far as the interiors go?
I think one of my favorite parts, which I don't know if there's many pictures of because it was really hard to photograph, but in addition to that cave space I described underneath the treehouse, there's this little secret conference room, and it's very unexpected, and it has trim and molding details that are a little more classic, and the furniture is a little more classic, but then it's paired with exposed light bulbs on the ceiling, and it's all concrete. You're like in a bunker almost, and the door is really fancy and has reeded glass and a big handle, and it's just the experience of discovering that and going in there, I think is really cool. And I hope, it's just one of those things that isn't going to get put on the websites, and but it's something that once you're a member of the co-working and you discover it, I think it'll be quite a nice little surprise.
Everybody likes a secret hiding place anyway that nobody else clearly knows is there.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the exterior. Talk to me about the design of this exterior and what kinds of things you used there to make this look happen.
Sure. Okay. So on the exterior, like I said, we've got 2 bars on this triangular site, and we had really high energy efficiency goals for this project. And so a commitment to continuous insulation was where we started, and consistency with that detailing was a really worthwhile set of problems to solve. And I think it came through all the way through construction and through CA, working things out in the field and getting the team behind the benefits of what happens whenever you make sure everything is wrapped up. Technically, it's the solid portions of the building are built out of insulated metal panels with a integral carrier rail that the rest of the facade hangs off of. It provides really great thermal breaks in a really tight envelope because it's insulation and weather barrier all rolled into one. And then the facade has some freedom outside of that. It also gains depth inherently to allow for these windows to be shaded, self-shaded as the day progresses, cutting down on that direct solar gain on the glass that we do have. So speaking of the pattern, so kind of like, I don't know, I think there's a range of this, but we, as architects, it's a question of how much we're recording the things, the aspects of the priorities of the project and the building and the owners and the groups bringing these things to life. How much are we recording that and setting it into stone and steel and glass? And how much are we actively informing of what that kind of a building should be like? And so this project was amazing because recording the passions and the priorities that this owner had was directly in line with what we wanted to say about how buildings like this should be. To me, I think we've got a tripartite building. The concept of the 3 layers, the palazzo block, the traditional European style of splitting a building into 3 horizontal layers. But what I like about this is that I think we're inverting it. I think we're showing what this group's version of the tripartite should be. Whereas, like, instead of having the piano rustico at the bottom, that's like a fortress, to keep the peasants out, and things get more delicate up above. It's inverted, where we put our most delicate material, our glass, on the ground floor. And we show that openness, that accessibility, we provide opportunities for collision, and we show what can be accessed inside this building immediately to the public, to everybody else in the building. And then as you go up, our brick section and our metal panel section, we really, this being spec office, we thought it best that we provide a uniform facade treatment so that the units could be could be as regular as possible. And by staggering the windows, which is actually like pretty difficult to figure out because of the loading patterns, but by staggering the windows and by working with this rigorous pattern of fins around the building and tying everything together, we're talking about the architecture weaves together. And this building is about weaving people together, ideas together, and people from all different kinds of businesses coming together. So that was our inspiration for that. And it took a lot to make sure that was followed through, and it needed to be rigorous, and it needed to be have buy-in from the whole team to get it actually realized. But I think we got there.
I think so. And it's kind of funny because, everybody has a different, if you're not the one that you kind of, when you're the one working on it, you see what you see.
Yeah.
But, me walking in, I've never seen this building before. I don't know anything about the design or the choices or the story or anything else. So I need to know a little bit more about this brick. At first,
Sure.
You had me confused because you talked about metal panels, and I'm like, those are metal panels? I thought they were some kind of thin brick and then you brought up the brick later, and I'm like, okay, I'm not losing my mind. But for me, this brick has two different perceptions depending on which picture I'm looking at. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you what those are in a minute. But tell me about this brick a little bit, because it's an interesting pattern.
So it's iron spot velour brick is the finish. It has more ferrous material in it. So it sheens and it catches the light differently depending on what angle it's at. And working with this triangular building, we were anticipating the way that it would change throughout the day, but also like looking at it straight on, the same. It wanted to be the same treatment because the geometry was so intense that let the variation in how the material reacts to light be what changes. So if you look at it from where the two bars come together, it's all the same material, but you see it looks totally different because of that, because of how the light is hitting it. And it's, Charlottesville's a red brick town. We're not, we weren't not aware of that. And that was, trust me, took a lot of talk to think about, is this the right thing to do? Ultimately, we did a lot of mock-ups, and the owner, this is crazy story where the owner came down to the mock-up one day and saw these particular bricks, and it reminded him of the dirt in his, he grew up on a farm outside Charlottesville, and it reminded him of the dirt from his farm. And from then on, it was like, this is what we're going with. I
was going to say, was that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, he was like, it's got to be this, because yeah.
These are different colored bricks, right?
So the whole way around is a blend of two different kinds of bricks. There's a dark gray, and then there's a redder kind of brick in that pattern. And then the top band is metal panel, obviously.
Right.
Finished metal panel.
I just saw that, and all I could picture is who had to draw up the brick pattern for these things.
It was great.
they're not the same from one to the next. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's just because some pieces are smaller than others, but all I could just see is, oh, that's got to be the most complicated brick pattern on the planet.
They actually are all the same between the fins. It's a rigorous meter all the way around. And I know I drew it a million times. I know Wolf Ackerman, people at Wolf Ackerman definitely drew it a million times. And then, getting it realized out in the field is a whole nother thing.
It looks fantastic. And my reaction to it, looking close up, I thought it was brick. You just threw me a little bit when the first thing you talked about was metal panels. I'm like, is that some kind of metal panel?
Yeah.
But when you look at the project from a distance, what that brick pattern looks in the pictures, I'm not saying it would look this way in person, it almost looks like straw mats. Like a woven straw from a distance.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this and like, what does that look like? And it looks like straw, like almost like straw mats, and it all looks one color from a distance.
That's great.
In the pictures, at least. So now I think I need to I have CSI friends in Charlottesville. So, and I'm way overdue for a visit. So now I think I need to come see this building because I want to see it up close and personal.
Oh, you got to go. Yeah. There's nothing like being there. Yeah. That's great.
No, it's really interesting and creative. Okay. So I understand that LEED Platinum certified was a goal on this building. Tell me about, I saw things like high performance envelope green roofs. I'm looking at one of your green roofs with what looks like brick. In the particular picture I have open, it looks like 3 different roof decks. Is that correct?
So yeah, it splits. We have green roofs that you can walk out on as the building steps down, the massing steps down to match the historic massing of the pedestrian mall. And then you can walk out onto these roof decks. So we've got raised planters, we've got planters down at your feet, and then we've got pedestal pavers, wood pedestal pavers. Underneath all that is a cavity of space that can hold water and slowly drain it to a cistern in the parking garage below. And then during dry times, that's used for pump back up and used for irrigation. So that was water use was one of the aspects we went for LEED.
Okay.
Yeah.
The taller building also has some green up there. Is that just a green roof and not an amenity space?
So the topmost level, you can actually get up there, and that's where the owner's office is on the top level. And so I think he's got a special key to go up there. It's a really nice. The views up there are amazing.
I can only imagine. I love that. Sorry, I went off. I saw that as I was asking about LEED, and it was one of the things on the list, and I kind of went off a rabbit hole. So tell me a little bit more about the LEED certification and what other things you did in the building to achieve that.
Well, Jill, why don't you take this one? Because I feel like I've been talking a lot. If you can, or I can.
We had a LEED consultant who we worked very closely with. Obviously targeting on the interior, that I can speak to some of that in terms of lighting, materials, and things like that, trying to meet a lot of the standards that are set in LEED. But because a good bit of the building was just tenant office space that was left white boxed, we didn't necessarily get into a lot of that on the upper floors so much. One thing, the operable windows was a feature that, and I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder on this, Tyler, to talk about that a little bit, but it was something that had gotten VE'd out of the project, and then COVID hit, and it was put back into the project after COVID or during COVID. And so that was, obviously something that goes towards the air quality of the building, and we were really excited that we were able to add that back as a feature.
It's not often you hear things going that direction.
Yeah.
You hear about things getting VE'd out all the time, but not VE'd out and then put back in. So it's nice to know that there was some positive benefit from COVID. Not much, but that's a pretty good one. to get something like that back because I love operable windows. I mean, I need that fresh air. You start to feel really, I'm not claustrophobic, but you feel closed in. It feels stale. My house right now in the middle of summertime, my sliding glass door is open 24/7. I'm like 30 feet off the ground. So, nobody's crawling in there, but just to have, fresh air in the house before we get to that season where it rains for 8 months straight and the doors have to be closed. So how nice to get that back. How about the enclosure? What did you do, or energy efficiency efforts in the building?
Sure. So we had a full energy model, and we went all LED lighting, of course, and the envelope system was so we could rely on it to be really, really tight and really well seal the building and not let air infiltration out. But one of the other priorities for the owner was fresh air. His office was in a building that was suffering from sick building syndrome while we were designing the building, and it was like front of mind for them. And so the building was designed to, off the bat, deliver twice as much fresh air as was needed. It's a DOAS system with fan coil units dispersed around the building, and it has a central chiller on the site. So that fresh air, while we went, it was like we got the exemplary performance for that particular credit, but we were going beyond that anyway because it was just such a high priority for them. And when you go to the building, the first time I went to the building with the air conditioning turned on for a site visit, it was like you could feel it. It felt so fresh, like in there, and there was just like this really nice breeze. But it was still an efficient system with the DOAS, and being able to use it across the whole building gained efficiency. The operable windows was a great thing to add back on top of all that, because that's even more. I mean, the system is really efficient, but then you don't even have to use it on the days when the weather is nice. And I just remember it was a super nice spring. Jill, do you remember that in New Orleans in spring of 2020 when we were all working at home? Mm-hmm. It was just amazing weather every day. And I remember I have a 20-foot wide shotgun house, and I remember opening the door, having the windows open and getting that cross ventilation, working on this building while we were putting together the documentation of what it would take to get those operable windows back. And I was just like, we got to do this. This is the way. Yeah.
Well, and probably at that time, nobody really knew what was going to happen next.
Yeah.
And maybe we were at that point, we didn't know, are we going to be working at home for years? What's this pandemic going to do? Whatever, And so sure. I could see a lot of firms were really looking at those kinds of things, also in how the air is being recirculated so that, we're not all maybe decreasing the opportunity to infect each other.
Yeah.
So definitely some changes to the way that we design buildings. It just popped in my head. Funny thing is, I was supposed to have a girls' weekend in New Orleans.
Oh.
Right. And it was one of 8 trips I had to cancel. Some of them for industry conferences and speaking engagements. But one of them was, we had this just cutest, adorable house. There was 4 of us, and we were going to do a 4-day weekend in New Orleans. And we had to cancel that trip, and we still haven't rescheduled it yet. So you guys might see me sooner than you think.
Come on down. It's going to be great. Yeah.
You can't show me the building, but I might come see you anyway.
Definitely wait till summer is over. It is hot as all get out here right now. So.
Oh, no. I've seen your temperatures. No, yeah. Thank you. We are looking at I live in Portland, Oregon, and starting Sunday, we're looking at upper 90s and then triple digit days for 3 or 4 days in a row. And I know to you, you're going, okay, so what? Big deal. For us, that's like, I'm going to melt. I'm going to die. I can't possibly deal with this. I mean, that's not a thing we see here a ton of, but like everybody else, we're seeing more of it. and more of it in record temperatures. So when I see some of the temperatures going on in your part of the world, I have all the empathy in the world for you, but no, I'm not coming to visit at that time of year. One of our favorite, I feel like one of the most really telling areas that we all learn our lessons as we grow in our careers. We grow from every project we do. We encounter different things we've never encountered before in every project we do. But usually you're, okay, I'm going to do that differently next time comes during construction. Either that or when the building's done and you actually experience it. So there's always one good, interesting story about construction of one type or another that maybe you had to pivot because something didn't quite come together the way you thought it did, or maybe something totally unrelated to your design. For example, I worked on a project once where the roofing sub decided to dispose of all their roofing chemicals they were mopping up there. I forgot what kind of roof it was, by pouring it down the roof drain, where it solidified and filled the roof drain.
Oh, no.
I mean, it's some of the crazy things you see happen on construction. So any kind of story, but I'd like to hear about one lesson you learned, or one thing that happened that made you more aware that you might do something differently the next time during construction. Anything.
All I can think of, Tyler was a little more entrenched in the CA process, but I do recall somewhere along the line, we originally had gyp ceilings in our restrooms, and we needed to make them accessible. And that something happened with the HVAC system that maybe we were going to have so many access panels in it, or something didn't get built as we had originally thought it was going to get built. And so we had to scramble and come up with a new ceiling type. And so now every project that I go through, I bring that up when I see a gyp ceiling, even though I the idea of a 2x2 acoustic tile, which is not what we did in this project. We had a little bit more money to spend than that, but I never want to suggest that, which is it's the go-to for a lot of lower end projects. That let's get creative. Let's figure out let's find an accessible ceiling that meets all the requirements of a restroom. But that looks good too. So I always preach about no boring bathrooms in the office because I think it's a place for respite. So why should it not get a little love too? So it's just something that I've been taking with me to the next project is what other options are there besides gyp and acoustic tile?
That's a perfect example of answering that question. What did you end up doing?
We ended up doing a metal paneled ceiling. So it met the wipeable, but it was also accessible.
I also love the no boring bathrooms. A bathroom is a bathroom, but the fact of the matter is, it is the one space in the building you can guarantee will get continual use through the life of the building. And sometimes there is so little attention paid to that space, and that drives me crazy. Why do we do that?
I know.
Yeah, see? We're going to be friends forever. How about you, Tyler? If you handled more of CA, you've got to have something good for me.
I think there's a lot. I mean, there were a million little problems to solve to get things together, and there's a real growing opportunity for me. And I think we all, once you've been through building a building, you know the stories that I'm talking about, where you just have to take a step back and think about maybe like what's the next best way that this can go. But I think just overall was just like the biggest lesson was just trying to keep the spirit up and just keeping not letting the great get in the way of the good, and knowing when to pick the battle to fight. Also, just specifically, like we had this, and I think Cherise will like this, that we had this. We wanted to do board form concrete. Jill, do you remember this? That we wanted to um, have that board form concrete in a piece of the co-working space, but we didn't have a great spec for it, and we'd used it a couple times, and then we were asking around at the office, and people were like, yeah, well, we just said board form, and then like in the field or like every time it was different. We figured it out a different way, or like we had this one guy who knew how to do it in the field, and then he just did it. And I was running around trying to like figure out what can I tell them to do that. And it being built during COVID, we weren't able to travel there as much as possible. And then one day they were going out on site, and this building preserved an existing historic facade for part of it that's along the downtown mall. So they had scaffolding set up and the big anchoring scaffolding bracing set up, and they were going to meet about the board form concrete, and the guys at Wolf Ackerman passed by with the owner's rep, the big the piece of concrete anchor that was holding the building like ballast, and it was made out of rough board form, and they were like, the owner was like, just do that. Can we just do that? So like, we're trying to figure out this technical language that we need to put into a document in order to do things, and then the other part of the team is just out there, and they're like, yeah, can we just call this guy that made this piece of temporary concrete and let's just get them to do it, and it was like, oh man. And then by the time we get this board form spec figured out, it's going to be out of style, and then no one will want to do it in their buildings anymore.
Well, I think you have an even bigger lesson there that I think that, at least over the course of my career, and this is definitely starting to change, but during the design process, when you have a problem you want to solve, sometimes the best way to get where you're going is to call up the contractor who does that kind of work. And instead of researching 85, and I'm a spec writer, so that's all I do all day is research products and write specs. But I have this slew of manufacturers reps and contractors and different people I know in the industry. And sometimes it's easier to call and say, okay, I'm going to sound like a kindergartner, but I'm going to describe to you what I'm trying to do. You got any suggestions? They're the ones that build it. They're the ones that see all of these crazy things that people do all of the time. And all of a sudden in 5 minutes, like you said, you just walk by, we'll just do that. Getting our contractors and subcontractors involved, ideally early in design, but you don't always get to do that. But regardless, asking for their advice. Trust me, they love to give it to people. They love it when any design professional calls them up and says, I'm doing this design and trying to work this out. What would your expertise tell me? And we all come out better by that collaboration. So yeah, no, I love that answer. Before I go to my closing questions, Tyler, I asked Jill this question, but I haven't asked you yet. What's your personal favorite thing in this building?
Oh, so I think we've touched on it a little bit, and the variety of spaces is great. And the design process that we had, where we were trying to be 360 about what are all the different kinds of people that will go, particularly into the public spaces and the co-working space. I think there's a lot of this design for collision and mixing spaces is great, and it brings people together. But in the back of my head, sometimes I'm worried about the space for introverts, in our buildings, and where do they go? And there's a few, like Jill said about the cave and conference room. There's some that aren't exactly photographed, but they're amazing little moments where we had a second to just think about it, and it's like, wouldn't it be great to have a little booth there? Jill, I'm thinking about that booth that overlooks back onto Main Street. It's one of my favorites. And another thing is we were having a tough conversation one day with the owner and the owner's rep and the contractor team, and working through something. I can't even remember what it was, but I called the owner's rep, and it was later on into the project. I called the owner's rep after to catch up and just like figure out what we needed to do next. And he was like, Tyler, don't worry about it, man. I just went outside. I'm in the roof garden. I'm sitting here, and there's bees, man. There's bees. The bees are back. It's all going to be okay. Like, don't worry. Like, we're going to be fine. And so like, the native plants, had and that was the moment when it like flipped over, like, oh my God, all these little tiny battles, but this thing is almost done, and it's going to be great when it gets open. So.
And look how just one space totally diffused whatever that tough day was about. Yeah. Don't sweat it. There's bees. I like that person already as well. And I love these little pop out. I'm not sure which one I'm looking for, but the little spaces, I always call them phone booths, which most people don't even know what that is anymore. With the doors on them where somebody can go and have a private phone conversation or work on something. I do really technical work. So I like, I'm at the point and I work from home. I'm at the point in my life where I don't have to have any distractions, but open spaces, as much as I love them, big, wide open spaces, they're not always the easiest thing to work in. And I love that you took into account either the introverted personality or the fact that people are going to need a quiet space on occasion. And it seems to be scattered throughout in different areas, small conference rooms, these little, you were just a minute ago, what are you calling these? These little pop-out rooms?
Well, there's the phone booth, but also there's the cave. And then there's just little nooks and crannies here and there that we found. It was like, what are we going to do with this little random piece of space? It was like, well, we'll just put some furniture in it and somebody's going to love this. So
I would be that person. I would walk into the space and I would look for the most secluded spot in the room. And it may be in the wide open, but it's the one over off in a corner by itself. I love that you guys thought about that. So I usually like, before we ask the final question that everybody gets, I like to ask one broader industry question. So for me, being in the industry for quite some time and watching the evolution of our industry, it feels to me like the profession of architecture is entering a transformational phase, more so than other transformational phases that we've gone through over the years, a large transformational phase with this kind of collision. I'm going to use your word, collision of the rapidly evolving technology, this huge generational shift that's going on right now, and also a continued lack of awareness by the general public at large of what architects really do. What do you feel our biggest industry challenges at the moment, or what do you feel like the biggest change? What is the number one thing that's going to result in the biggest change in our industry right in front of us, in your opinion? Obviously, that could be a lot of things, but what's taking us to the next step?
I'll take this one first. So I think something that we've been talking about a lot in our office lately is how we do our work, how we collaborate. So the remote factor, the hybrid collaboration, how can we make that work for all generations? Because you have folks like me who are kind of in the middle still a little bit, but there's folks that have been around a lot longer than me that are used to their pen and pad of paper and sketching in person and things like that. And so how can we get our technology in particular up to speed with what we need in order to let the folks who want to use the pen and paper, how can they still do that, but it works for the folks that are remote, in that hybrid collaboration scenario. And so, we haven't figured it all out yet. Some of us are a little more stubborn than others when it comes to that. And so, we don't know what the right answer is, but it goes back to, that we've always done it that way. Your pet
Mm-hmm.
peeve. We've always done it that way, and it's worked really well. But how do we take the new tools that we have and do it even better, or just do it differently? I don't know that it's better.
Right.
It's just different.
Right.
And so not everybody's as easily flexible with that change. And so I think the biggest challenge is people being flexible and adaptable to a new way of collaborating.
I couldn't agree more. And there's another layer to that. And this happens to be a passion area for me. But the other layer of that is, I mean, let's be real. Those of us that have been around a long time, we're no longer in the space of being industry game changers. We're kind of at the more of the, may not be at the end. I'm at the oldest end of Gen X. We're at the later part of our career, and the people who are going to change the game now are the younger people like Tyler.
Oh, God.
We still need to be, yeah, I expect you to change the world, Tyler. But we need to be able to work with them. We cannot sit here. Mentorship and teaching is a big thing for me. And so I love working with young professionals. They keep me out of that we've always done it this way mindset. But we need to be able to effectively collaborate with them, which that flexibility you mentioned, we not only have to find that flexibility in our technology, we have to find that flexibility in ourselves. Because we have a lot of, experience that we can share with them, but they have just as much to teach us. But if we have this block up that I've been around forever, I know everything, and this, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Well, it may not be broken, but what if you could do it better? It doesn't have to be broken to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that answer, because I do think that we really need to be looking at those things more closely and finding that balance in the middle, because we do have to embrace them and teach them, because it's not going to be all that long from now where we're not going to be around, and we want to set them up for success to, take everything to the next level. How about you, Tyler? What do you think our big shift is going to be in this industry, or what do you think it needs to be?
Well, I think so. Building off of what you guys said, I think so. My first year of college was 2008, and so pretty soon after I started my freshman year, the recession kicked in, really, and the amount of people that were in the profession who were like in their 30s in architecture then totally went down, right? And so it has felt at times, and I'm really happy to be at the place that I'm at now, but it has felt at times that there's a gap there. That cohort directly above me, those folks are really rare, and so but the priority that we put on mentorship, like Jill was talking about, is the kind of thing that I wish that I think needs to happen everywhere, and being intentional about the way that we work, and the sort of the bedrock of just blocking and tackling skills that people sort of at my age need to gain, needs to be there first, so that we can then step out of our comfort zone from a stable place and push things and push the envelope. And I think the biggest challenge of our time is just the question about carbon and what do we do, and how our profession changes. And it's a whole different conversation like this, but it's woven into everything. And what we're going to need to shift about is focusing on that more at it needs to have a higher priority in the million different things that go into making design decisions. It just needs to further and further be put into the forefront. And I don't know how we do this, but working with clients to figure out how do we not just build, but build only exactly what we need, because everything that we build emits carbon right now. And how do we work with them analytically to be able to understand, to use buildings more so that we need less of them. And to me, it's a cultural shift. And it's an industry-wide thing that goes beyond architecture.
And I know I'm seeing, I get to talk to people from all over the place. I had an interview yesterday with an architect in Copenhagen about a really interesting building. And he was talking to me about things that I'm just like, I never hear anybody talking about that. So I think that those things are starting to happen in some places. And I think a lot of things going on in our world are going to force us into that sooner if we just don't do it on our own. Mm-hmm. We watch all of these things that are going on, the disasters. I mean, today's a perfect example, these fires in Maui. I mean, it's just devastating. But we're all noticing how much of this there is. This isn't just the occasional hurricane or something that, you're always going to see every once in a while. All of a sudden, there's crazy stuff going on everywhere and super high temperatures. And so I think that we're not going to have much of a choice. It's whether we're smart enough to get on board earlier or we wait till we're in a desperate situation and have no other choice. And then at that point, we might all be living in caves. Let's hope not, though. So final question, because I'm running myself out of time. And so I'm going to try to do this quickly. As human beings, we all hope that our presence and actions in this life leave some kind of impact. Now, those could be little things or big things, but I don't think I know anybody who doesn't want to do something to leave some part of our world in a better place. My mission to do that in the different things that I do, I call my world domination statement. So when I say world domination, I'm finding I have to explain this better to people. It doesn't mean taking over the world. It means taking over my world. How am I going to live and make my best world and maybe make some impact on others in the process? So my question for you, personally or professionally, is what do you hope to do or are you doing to make an impact on our world? What's your world domination statement? Just an easy, small, quick question. You don't have to think about that one at all, right?
Yeah.
I guess for me, when I became an interior designer, the first projects that I was working on were all workplace and office. And it amazed me how many sad, dark, inefficient, unpleasant office spaces that I went to. And that's where people were spending a good part of their day. And so it may, in just coming up with a few simple changes or suggestions could completely change how that person's day or how their space was impacting their day. So for me, it's definitely not about anything worldwide, but it's more about how the things that I do can impact individual people's lives, whether that be in the way that we design their office space or if it is for a hotel or a restaurant. And it's more about, it's giving people a place for respite and enjoying their loved ones. How can what I do, let me say that again. How is it that what I do can impact people's well-being and their daily lives? And I think that's important, and it seems small, and they probably don't even know I'm doing it half the time. And maybe that's what's special about it, is that you're kind of in the background and they don't even notice how much improvement they have in their daily lives because of decisions or design solutions that we've come up with.
I tell people all the time that the smallest pebbles make the biggest ripples. Those things that we do every day. I have a pet project. When I go anywhere, I smile at every single person I pass. Sometimes it's almost a social experience, a social experiment in different cities. How many people can I get to smile back? New York is a really tough crowd, by the way. But I have had people stop dead in their tracks and turn around to me and say, thank you for that. Or, you have a beautiful smile. Or it's such a silly little thing, but changing somebody's day in a way that maybe they don't even realize their day is being changed. To think that doesn't have a huge impact, I think, is discounting yourself. Because that's a big deal. Where your space is where you are all day, every day. You can be really miserable in that space, or you can be comfortable and creative and more productive because of it. And all of those things lead to better things. Mm-hmm. So I love that answer. How about you, Tyler? World domination statement. You can do it.
Yeah. So, I think the thing that I'm working on the most right now, I think, is goes back to overthinking it. And if we're going to say we need to think about things just the right amount, and we need to spend our time on things like this to get the results that we want to better people's lives, to Jill's point, just as important as overthinking it is then like taking a second, bringing it back to the central idea, distilling it down to communicate it effectively to other people. And I think it's like our profound responsibility to do the homework and to sweat the details and to pour our passion into it. But you have to be just as passionate about empathetically thinking about how this is going to read to someone else to make that connection. And it's like a sense of respect to be able to take the time to communicate clearly to people what you're trying to get across. And I think if we're going to take that hard stand and say we're here thinking about things intensely for you, we also need to be very intentional about how we put things together and present it.
Well, and that's what emotional intelligence is all about, right? Not getting out of your own head and looking at how you need to, whatever it is, interact with that other person. And it's a place where many of us are lacking, is that you can be the smartest person in the room, but if you can't communicate or you can't connect with the other people, it doesn't matter how smart you are, nobody's going to hear you.
Right.
And so what I hear you just saying is we need to up our emotional intelligence in the things that we do, because that's going to be a positive result for everybody involved if we're all kind of remembering to think about others, not just ourselves, or what we need, or how we hear it, as opposed to how you may need to hear it for you to be on board or to understand or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
It might help. Yeah.
So
things like the carbon problem.
That about it?
Like that.
Yeah, well, definitely. Jill and Tyler, thank you so much for being here today. This was a lovely conversation. I want to come to New Orleans now. I want to get some things for my hair. I can't wait to see these.
Hair flare? Yes.
Oh, we are so going to be friends. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining me and telling me about this great building with all these crazy, interesting things. I hope my readers, they'll get pictures. They'll get the podcast. But I think they're going to find this very interesting.
Thanks for having us.
Great.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you'll come back and see me. You guys have.
Yeah.